Shall we walk the multiverse together? I wanted to speak about in this episode about a transformation that I feel is happening. To dive into it, I have noticed that we are 8 billion objects. And so the world, even though visible, is being viewed by a self invisible. We are 8 billion objects, or I should say it this way. We are we are 8 billion identities, 8 billion subjects in one object. Imagine this is the first airport. Um, it's the airport we're lifting off from the species. 8 billion ideological moments of attention on one object. So one world, 8 billion experiencers in the world. Now, when speaking about a multiverse, or the potential for multiple universes in the same moment, I would say that we have to prepare for the psychological symmetry of this idea of many multiple objects in one subject and multiple subjects in one object. I feel the human being is strangely copying the planet. Excuse me, to continue. Either we can begin from the concept or we can begin from the context. Either the context is static, the concept is moving. Either the concept is static, the context is moving. The whole discussion between the outcome of the human being depends on this very idea that if the concept is real, So I will give you an example. Right now, my my existence is like the concept, you can say. Or I can say it like this: my experience without the context, the concept cannot arise. The concept is dependent on the context, okay? So when we look at the self is dependent on the world. When we look at what the self is made of, we notice experience, the faculty of intelligence, the mind, consciousness, and how there is something looking through a first person view. So that is the experience. So the experience of self is a part of existence. So we can say the experience of self is part of the existence of the world. Therefore, the existence is the context to experience that finds itself conceptual. So what does that mean? That means our attention is lighting the room. And so whether it's you see darkness, light entering it, or you see an inanimate universe and suddenly something becoming animate, this focus on the experience and the existence, when I look at my sense of self as I'm speaking right now, it is an experiential phenomenon. And this experiential phenomenon knows that it will return to existence. So ultimately, experience is the intelligence of existence. What I'm trying to say is that our experience on this planet depends on our existence. That means in front of your eyes, you need existence, then experience. I would say behind your eyes, you need experience than existence. You see, it's just the reality of space and matter being an eternal duality. And so, as long as we divide by one side, if you think you're just the soul, you will be staring at matter. You know, if you think you're just matter, you will be staring at space. That means the purpose of all form that takes shape is in some sense to break. And so, you know what it is? It's kind of like, it's kind of like, imagine an empty piece of paper, and imagine existence was something written on this piece of paper. And then it was instantly erased. Something written, something erased, something written, something erased. Then after some point, there was a point where something was written, but it wasn't erased, and the next line came about. And so that thing, the second line wasn't erased, and the next line came about. Okay, guys, hold on. Let me take off my sweater. First, there was existence. Prior to existence, it's as if before the number one, there was nothing. Zero does not have a value to the individual, which requires the number one. So we can say that one, pretty much our universe is not a whole number set, but a natural number set, starting from one. When there was existence, I want to go from, excuse me, from this idea of an unconscious world to an unconscious self, from the unconscious self to a conscious self, then to a conscious world. Pretty much the pattern is symmetrically repeating. So I would say it would be as if first there is a world, then there is a self which is a part of that world, then to that self there is another world in which there is a self also in that world. So pretty much it's a relationship of being a world and being a self. We call being a world existence, we call being a self experience. So experience and existence are two sides of the same coin. They are codependent in the sense that for the individual, for the one looking, it's as if when I sleep, when my experience is not there in deep sleep, my existence to myself is absent. But if there is someone else, let's say someone is sleeping and someone is watching them, right? And so it would be a situation where that person is not existing to themselves when it comes to experience, but to others they're existing. So I would say self-existence requires self-experience. That means the sense of the individual, the being, is the light in the room. So that light makes us see the room. So you can say that the human mind is what allows us to see the design. So the human mind is instantaneously, like, isn't that remarkable that our minds are simultaneously being the world? It's as if right now in this moment my mind is receiving the whole moment, but at the same time I'm an individual also questioning and wondering about the moment too. It could be the case that self is an illusion between two worlds, or in some sense a world is an illusion between two selves. Body matter, the body made of matter is temporary, and space, because it is not made of anything, it is eternal. It's like the absence of matter is space. So in the absence of form, shape, um, substance, color, beyond these, it's like, is the world the hallucination of the self, or is the self the hallucination of the world? Are we nature's hallucination, or is nature our hallucination? I keep thinking about the options the human being has when the human being wakes up in the morning. The options are to move as an object, to move as a subject, in some sense, to receive as an object and to receive as a subject. And also there's the option of watching the object and subject happen, but at that point you can't be an object and a subject. So any moment you see an object, I'll give you an example. A person looks out, let's say you look out the window and you see a tree. How do you know you are not that tree? Because you are observing it outside the tree. That means you're not inside the tree, you're outside of the tree observing it. Therefore, observance requires you to be outside of the phenomena you're seeing, so technically it means you're beyond what you see. So, if a person looks at a tree and they're like, I am not that tree. In some sense, imagine now a person suddenly noticing, looking at the subject, the idea of the tree. So the observer of objects, that's kind of like, we don't freak out. We're like, it's a subject, it's me, it's the idea of me. But when we wonder how the idea of me is being observed, that's when it really mysticism begins. Right now, we are 8 billion objects in the subject of the human species, humanity. Now, it could be that every person can become how do I say? It's like an object is two-dimensional, for example. A subject is three-dimensional, object two-dimensional, for example. Subject three-dimensional. I feel whatever it is beyond object, subject, it has to have the word ject in it. So we have an object, subject, and a non-ject. Oh my god, nobody's come up with this word, I think. So guys, a non-ject, I'm gonna declare the word. We know we are bodies because we exist. We know we have minds because these bodies can be controlled. That means a person who moves their physical body, that's a suggestion that there is something in control of something. Now, as a mind, you have to be a subject. As a body, it's like it has to be something you can touch. It's an object. And what really differentiates between the body and the mind phenomena, which Immanuel Kant called noumenon, or some philosophers called it qualia, that can only be seen. So here's the difference. The body can be touched and seen, but the mind can just be seen. You know, I can remember a memory from a couple years ago, but I can't touch that memory, you know what I mean? I could remember an apple pie, but I can't literally touch that apple pie, you know. So that's the thing. The mind is not something we can actually touch. It's just viewable. The body is the opportunity of mobility. So it could be that we were minds before we were bodies, and we couldn't realize until the body stopped moving to itself, so it could start moving anew. It's like, what is the purpose of an object? To become a subject. That's what evolution has proved. Darwinian evolution. And what is the purpose of a subject? To move objects. Now, let's say you're a subject that has moved objects for eons. Then it would be to wonder if you are a higher dimensional object. Sometimes I've had this thought that what if, like, in the dimension that the human being exists, we're like a living being, but in higher dimensions, we're like a grain of sand. Like, the higher dimensions cannot even consider our intelligence because it is so inanimate to them. Because their movements could be potentially so vast. Sometimes I think about it like it's like a person looking at an ant, and the person looking at the ant and being like, yo, can this ant know I'm looking at it? You know? And imagine an ant figured out a human being was looking at it. It would just freak out. It would have nothing else it could do. It can't speak English, doesn't have the brain of a human being. So what we can do is just panic or trust. Two options when it comes to higher dimensions, I think. I feel we need two languages. And we have to realize language evokes image while we're in an image. Right now, I am in reality, and someone listening to me is going to be like, yo, where's this kid's voice coming from? Do you know? Imagine someone listens to this, you know? So it would be something where it has to be concluded to the abstract. So man has no choice to consider knowledge that he doesn't know yet as unknown, and the unknown, because it is unknown, it is a permission for error. So this is the challenge. Our challenge as creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere is not that how do we organize our knowledge. The knowledge is it's just how what we splash on an empty canvas. It's how we actually respond to the unknown, and if we actually use our knowledge to figure out how the unknown is. You know what that means? That means it's like all of human knowledge is like making a spear, right? And in some sense using the spear to fish. You know, it's like sharpening the spear is knowledge. You know, for me, I feel memorization does not help, and the reason a lot of people go through the educational system and it's just a distant memory for them is because you remember what you put energy into. You remember all those efforts from the inner realm. If you notice it, that in, for example, techniques that involve memory, memorization of a lot of things. Imagine like you wanted to memorize a deck of cards, right? I personally, like, I feel maybe if I practice a week, I could do it, but it's one of those things that there's a special technique where they realize that a person remembers journeys better. They remember journeys better. Therefore, if you in your mind are memorizing a deck of cards, the memory palace technique literally is like you imagine a city, a town that you've walked in so many times, right? So many times the certain streetway and all the shops your mind is memorized and it knows, right? So each shop you pass by, you declare a sort of number and, what do you call it? A sort of number and the suit of the card. The suit of the card, right? So when the person is trying to remember everything, all the whole deck of cards, they're actually in their inner realms walking in a city, right? And so the psychological explanation of this is that the more abstract you make something, the more you're going to remember it, the more it gets ingrained into the long-term memory. And that's such a terrible analysis. It's the more you pour out, right? It's the quality of the metaphor, its involvement, you know, its importance, honestly. Anything the person realizes makes important for themselves, it doesn't matter what the past says, it's too important. It's like we're unknown storytellers that have taken the known characters in our stories too seriously. There is such a long road ahead, and we're still trying to, like, there's still war and violence on this planet. Sometimes it's unbelievable. It's as if, like, problems that should have been solved centuries ago still linger. Conclusions that should have been made centuries ago have yet not been made. And it's strange. It's as if the species fears its own advancement. And that is why it's easier to be violent and selfish. That's it. I would say there is nothing wrong with our species. It's neither good or bad. It's just afraid. And it's afraid, believe it or not, of matter and space. Let me tell you what I mean by that. We are afraid of matter changing. That's pretty common sense. You know, anytime something changes, it's not per se just fear, it's just new stimulus is entering. It's like the brain has more information to process, so if it gets overloaded with too much information, it can't process it, it's too much. You know? An example would be like I remember a family friend, um, when I was very young. Like my parents would take me and my brother and uh, to a family friend who had kids and whatnot, and same age as us. And so, anyways, there was this video game called Doom, this messed up video game. And so in this video game, there was something that when at any time all three of us when we were looking at this video game, there was a sort of fear or we would get scared, we would just turn off the volume. And when we would turn off the volume of the scary horror video game, it's as if the brain had less information to process, so it would definitely not get overwhelmed. You know? I feel that our mind steps out, our body steps in. Our body becomes a memory to the mind, and the mind becomes a movement to the body. How epic is that? And it's weird. It's like there was that scene in the movie Avatar where that guy just goes into the forest and all the moths or whatever like come and land on the guy and it's like a divine sign or something. I feel thoughts are the same way. It's like a person walks into the street and endless thoughts just, land on them. Sri Ramana Maharshi says the object is not sentient, unsentient, if you can say. That means matter can't think. Then we have the idea of the soul, the Atman, and the soul is neither an object, not a subject, it's non-object. Therefore, we are a subject. Life is a subject. The subjects are a signal of the real. That means it's very funny. Right now we feel our bodies are real and we feel the soul. We can't even see the soul and we're like, okay, mind is an illusion of the body. But I am telling you, mind is the reality. It's as if our minds are way more familiar with the world than our body. It's like our body is technically in the jurisdiction of a conscious mind. And so the boundaries, like you can see like the boundary of the body, it's like the edge of your skin, but what is the boundary of the mind? And it's the edge of your will. And your will has no edge if you have energy enough to move. It's like, everybody had hope, but they didn't have energy. It's like we need energy and hope. whatever way you look at the human condition, it's weird. And normality automatically, by the nature of how weird the universe is rendered a sort of a mirage in the desert of the strange. I feel we should take our lessons from history, and history pretty much has literally, people have been born and their attention has gone to how else the past can move, as if all our ancestors, they were adding to the database of ways of human living, you know. And for me, it's abstract, but there has been moments where I have said certain sentences, and then just deep down, I felt like, okay, maybe like there's a certain percentage of people on the planet who've thought the same way. Sometimes I reach the thought, I'll tell you, it was very next level, guys. I remember I got this thought for a book, The Garden of what was it? The Garden of Unbroken Thoughts, something like that. Sorry, The Garden of Broken Thoughts. It was some idea. Then I searched it and I realized, oh my God, somebody else had written that title. It was something like that. And I remember it was this profound moment where I'm like, okay, we're definitely rising in a signal way. You know, it's not, even though the DNA is unique, the rhythmic activity of the species is happening. Later on in this episode, hopefully, I'll be able to get into a Marcus Aurelius quote tunnel. You know, Marcus Aurelius has some next level quotes. He was like he was more than a stoic. He was like living history. The wisdom of honestly, very, very sort of Buddhic parallels to the transformation of attention to virtue, you know. The options are we die as a body, we endlessly live as a mind, or truth grabs the kitten by the neck and pulls it out of the box. You know what's interesting? When you look at others, they're an object. But when you come to look at yourself without a mirror, you're left as a subject. And what is a subject to us? The subject of self is a view. So it could be that language was just the bridge and never the end. The idea of the self is very fascinating. You know, sometimes I look at it and it's like memory makes it feel like a drop, a database of drops. And then attention present makes you feel like a river, you know? And beyond the river, it is the ocean. Now, what is the psychology, or what should I should say, what happens to the mind, to a dynamic, collective mind, before becoming an ocean? An ocean of soul. A soul ocean. I feel that the way we can cross the multiverse, walk the multiverse together as a species, is by developing a system where efficiency equals quality of attention's temporary journey. Or let me just say attention's journey. We build a civilization, advanced civilization, for individuals. We build an advanced civilization for collective minds. And we also create an option for unknown possibilities. That means this is a very unique strategy, but I'm saying let's treat the unknown as a member of our civilization. It may be a strange idea, but I think it would be one of the most interesting ideas when it comes to in the future how human beings are going to process extraterrestrial contact, right? So if we were to envision so far ahead in a scientific context, imagine that passports had underneath them a species section, where it wasn't just nationality, your name or whatever, it was like, it showed your species, like, whoa, and your star system, you know? So it was a point, imagine, where human civilization advanced so much that actual aliens were like, could become a member of human civilization. That means technically our human rights would extend beyond our humans, you know? So eventually there will be an unknown member of civilization. So we are not that far ahead, so we can at least treat like a blank, like you know, an equal sign member of a question mark member of civilization. We have to literally give the question mark human citizenship. And when we journey, we build a vehicle, whether it's in the inner realms or outer realms. In the inner realms, if you're mature, your attention is enough. The presence of your attention and your trust in it is enough for you to pilot. In the outer realms, the best thing, the way matter is piloted, is it's piloted to stillness. So a human being that throughout the day has moments where they just are, they sit still and silent for like 10 to 20 minutes, and they just take in how they're just in the world. They are as the world, they're being the event of life, you know? Okay. This episode is a bit turbulent, guys, but bear with me. Pretty much, I see the world like an onion, and we move between these contexts. And so, the central point, the central point of life is not the idea of you, but it is where the idea of you arises. And what it means is that in order to be an individual in a world that knows something about that world, everything you see in that world has to come back to an individual point. That means the more a person knows themselves, the more they are being aware of how they receive their senses into, or process their sensory perception into knowledge. The mind is moving always. And I feel we don't have dreams, we find ourselves in dreams. The dream is there, the mind is moving. I feel just from the beginning, it's like guys, I feel I have to make this part one. I feel I'll take it to a point that the destiny of the object is the void. The destiny of the subject is to infinitely continue in the void. The destiny of what is beyond the object and subject cannot be defined by the object and subject. And so we're at a point where we know there is something more, but we can't be it. We can't relate to it as an individual. So it's as if human beings have reached the edge of a dimension where they can't be human beings to pursue. So when I say shall we walk the multiverse together, this is a suggestion of how far the human pattern and design is going to echo. Because whether it's 8 billion objects, one subject, or if it's one object, 8 billion subjects, it's as if this relationship is like a sine wave. That means the moment you're like, no way, the universe is repeating itself. It's like, what is the universe doing? You know? And for me, it's strange. It's as if like it's like the same thing that the genes are doing. It's like the stars are doing. You know, that means a star is born and a star dies, but the only thing we're not seeing is, excuse me, with stars, like, you know, uh, like in Japan, how they are getting a love hotel or something, you know, so we don't, we don't see, it's like the reproduction of a star, but we see its beginning and end. And its need for continuity. There's something strange in just the world that, aside from this whole cause and effect thing, as if like we're in this giant space and I don't know, dominoes have been set into motion and the dominoes are all falling. It's like, aside from all the dominoes falling and us being the effect of how our ancestors chose to live and be a causal point in their realm or at their time, it's as if we're either endlessly chasing the effect of our own karma, or in some sense we shift. So either the self attains infinity, or we move beyond the infinite self. So it's like, it's the infinite self is the witness or how should I say? Aside from continuity, novelty, and just unknown or hidden, these are the three options. Either we repeat the pattern, either we create a new pattern, either we don't know. And I think that becomes very high speed when the person is non-dual. They may feel they want to be like secluded, but I'm saying like, or isolated, but I'm saying like, uh, the mind is an instrument designed to be heard. And so it's just the effort of the species and how multidimensional it sees reality. It's as if people, they wonder about what they're going to do like a day after or years after. But I'm saying, what is the human species going to do if we go at the very edge of time? It's like, is it repopulation? Are we trying to overpopulate the whole universal sector with the human design? Or are we trying to just experience a part of nature? Because both outcomes kind of lead to the void. So to some degree, it feels like the best way, the best system is one where the person enjoys being in, or living in, or serving. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. This is part one. There's probably going to be a part two to this, titled probably One Object, Multiple Subjects. So thanks for listening. Blessings.